Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Adjustments meeting for November 17th, 2021. Our first order of business will be review and approval of minutes from our October 26th meeting. I was not there. Did anybody who was there have any comments, scriveners, corrections, confirmations related to the not the agenda, the actual meeting minutes?
Go term that I just am not familiar with.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
no, I looked through them, Joe, everything looked fine to me.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, I move we approve the minutes of the 26th October meeting.
I have a motion.
I'll second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One abstention, and it passes, and those minutes are formalized. Which now gets us to the main reason we are here.
Good evening, Your Honor and Chairman, board members. Tonight, we're here for the conditional use permit amendment located at 1515 North Mountain View Road. So Logos Schools is requesting an amendment to the phasing plan for the approval as part of a conditional use permit for the school and church facility that's located at 1515 Logos Road. The original conditional use permit was approved by the Board of Adjustment on August 2nd, 2016, with 7 conditions and a building height variance, and the building height variance was also approved with no conditions. This is the subject property here, just south of Mountain View, at right where it makes the 90-degree turn. So to cover the background and give you a kind of history of the approval process and what is approved to date, on June 16th, Logos applied for a conditional use permit for a school and church facility and the variance for the building height. It was a private school campus, including a school gymnasium building with maximum capacity for 520 students and approximately 75 staff members. The site plan included the church building, chapel, to be used for services and assemblies, playgrounds, and an outdoor courtyard, a track and athletic field, detention pond, open space, and a parking lot to serve all of the uses. The church and the school were proposed to exceed the 35 feet maximum building height by 11 feet for a total of 46 feet in height. So the conditions of the approval were that the water system shall be extended to the site in a loop configuration to provide adequate fire flow and redundancy and protect against poor water quality. The sewer system shall be extended to the site. The development shall install public street as indicated in the adopted multimodal transportation plan, and the proposed road to the development shall be constructed to minor arterial street standards. The proposed development shall be aligned so that a feasible connection to F Street expansion adjacent to the bridge can be completed in the future. The developer shall widen Mountain View from Slonaker Drive to the proposed intersection to a minimum width of 28 feet, edge to edge of asphalt, and work with city staff to identify a pedestrian corridor along the east-west connection from Slonaker Drive to the subject property. The developer shall build the roundabout shown in the site plan submitted for the conditional use permit as opposed to a stop, controlled, or signalized intersection. And lastly, the pedestrian bridge shown on the site plan submitted for the conditional use permit shall be constructed to provide access across Paradise Creek from the existing pathway to the site. So those were the conditions for the approval of the conditional use permit. This is the civil site plan that was submitted and approved. As you can see, track and field up here. This is the school location, the chapel over here, and then as described, the roundabout, the street extending down to where F Street would connect, and then continuing in a loop configuration around the campus and then out again. This is the floor plan that was submitted at the time for the school. It was 2 stories, classrooms on the outer edge of both stories, an open courtyard with a gymnasium and an assembly hall. This is the proposed elevations of the school, just around 42 feet in height from all directions. This is a proposed rendering of what the school would look like. So parking requirements at the time of approval for kindergarten and elementary schools and junior highs, it was 1 space per employee and faculty member. High school required 1 space per employee and faculty member, and an additional 1 space for every 8 students. There were 40 faculties proposed at the time, for faculty and staff members, and 34 high school students. Therefore, the total number of required parking spaces for Phase 1 site plan was 45 parking spaces. Churches required 1 space per 3 seats or 60 inches of pew, or 40 square feet of open assembly area. The site plan at the time showed in Phase 1 approximately 120 parking spaces. In Phase 2, no additional parking was provided, and in Phase 3, an additional 260 parking spaces. In total, that would bring us to 380 total parking spaces shown upon completion. So the approved phases for the project, Phase 1 was to include the public street improvements necessary to mitigate impacts generated by the increased traffic demand as a result of the development, including the construction of the new north-southbound street that will provide the direct access to the school. Also included in Phase 1 is the installation of necessary utilities, vehicle circulation within the site, including parking for approximately 120 vehicles, and the track and field. Phase 2 would include construction of the school building containing classrooms, offices, and the assembly space. And Phase 3 would include adding a regulation-sized gymnasium to the east side of the school building, constructing a chapel, and additional parking areas to accommodate the additional uses and special event parking on the site. This is an image of what Phase 1 would entail. Again, the track and field here, parking adjacent to that, as well as on this side, and the loop configuration showing the infrastructure with the roundabout, as well as the street. Phase 2 shows the addition of the school here in the center. And Phase 3 was the chapel building with the additional parking. So construction progress up to date. So far, the project has, within the project, they've completed the multimodal bridge construction over Paradise Creek in the northwest corner that provides access to the site. The track and the field have been constructed on the east side of the property. And what is currently ongoing is extending those utilities for sewer to the site and extending the water system and loop configuration that provides the accurate fire flow mentioned earlier. And they're continuing to work on construction drawings, including the design of the roundabout. So the current proposal, and for your consideration tonight, on September 9th, 2021, the applicant submitted the request to amend this phasing plan. At this time, the applicant proposes the alternate phasing plan due to lack of funding to build the school as a part of Phase 2. So the alternate proposed would include in Phase 1 the public street improvements necessary to support demand as a result of the development. This includes the construction of the public street and the installation of public improvements and utilities as described in Phase 1 of the original phasing plan. This work, like I said, has already begun. Phase 2 includes the construction of the fellowship hall, the parking areas to accommodate the uses. The fellowship hall will contain an assembly space, commercial kitchen, and restroom. The fellowship building will be built while Phase 1 is also being completed. And then in Phase 3, this would include the school building, the regulation-sized gym to the east side of the school building, construction of the church, administration buildings, chapel, and a pedestrian bridge on the southwest corner of the property. And additional parking spaces to accommodate the added uses and special event parking. The order of these individual components will be based upon funding. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are proposed to be constructed concurrently. In order for permits to be issued, however, in Phase 2, a security must be deposited with the city for public improvements included in Phase 1, which have yet been constructed. So this is kind of an image showing those phases. Phase 1 here, as we discussed, track and field is already complete. And additionally, the bridge allowing access to the property has been complete. Included in phase one would be the construction of the roundabout, the addition of the road here. Phase two, whoops. Well, new clicker. Let's go back. Oh. There we go, okay. Phase two, it would be this purple section here, showing the fellowship hall and the additional parking provided. Phase three would be the chapel here, as well as the school, and then the additional parking here in the rear. Current parking requirements for this phasing plan. Since the approval, zoning code has been, ordinances have changed requiring different parking standards. The current parking standards for elementary, kindergarten, and junior high require 2 spaces per classroom, plus 1 space for every 8 seats in a large assembly area. For high schools, it's 5 spaces per classroom, plus 1 space for every 8 seats in a large assembly area. And for churches, the requirement is 1 space per 4 seats, or 100 inches of bench seating, plus 1 per square feet, or 1 per 100 square feet of open assembly area. So in total, the required parking for the fellowship hall would be 248 spaces. The track and field, 62 spaces, and the school would require 193 spaces as proposed. What they're proposing in phase one is 121 spaces. Phase two, 177 spaces. Phase one and phase two, since they are proposing they commence at the same time. 298 spaces will be available upon completion of the first 2 phases. This is an adequate number of spaces to serve the fellowship hall and the track and field. And then in phase 3, an additional 196 spaces will be provided. This brings us to a total of 494 spaces that are to be shared between the entire campus at completion. Staff will review the plans to determine compliance with parking requirements once all building plans are submitted. And this is kind of a breakdown showing where those parking areas are. Again, this area here combined with this area here is 122 spaces. This purple area is the addition of the 177 spaces. And this additional red area here provides another 196 stalls, bringing the total to 494. Again, this is a image showing what this would look like on site. Again, this is a rendering of the fellowship hall that's proposed to be developed in phase 2. This is a floor plan showing the fellowship hall with the open area here. There's a commercial kitchen in this corner, and then restroom facilities here. Elevations on this are just over 40 feet, so they're still well within the variance that was approved. And so recommendation from staff tonight is that the staff recommends approval of the amendment to the phasing plan for the existing conditional use permit with the following condition. In accordance with Moscow City Code, the term of approval of the conditional use permit shall not exceed the 2 years from the date of final decision, with the ability to apply for an additional 2-year extension prior to expiration. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you all might have.
Thanks, Amy. Well, this is kind of a multiple question, I guess. Mike, you might need to weigh in with your experience on the answer to this. First of all, on the original conditional use permit and variance, there were some conditions set. And one of the conditions that was written down here was that this also requires roadway widening on Mountain View Road from Schlonaker to the future intersection up there by the roundabout. And almost all of that from Schlonaker to the park is not in the city limits. It's in the county, and it's under the jurisdiction of the North Lake Tahoe Highway District. Does the city have the authority to set conditions and standards outside of the city limits that is somebody else's jurisdiction?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly would have to work with Lake Tahoe County Highway District to pretty much realize those improvements. So same thing with the roundabout at that area. that location. That'll be pretty much within Lake County Highway District. So it's my understanding, we've already had those conversations, and that shouldn't be an issue as far as those improvements to the roadway.
If my memory serves me correct, though, this was not a condition that was set by this board at the time.
It was, yeah,
It
correct.
was?
It was, correct.
Okay, because if I remember correct, I made the motion and that condition was not approved, but we might check the minutes on that. I had an argument with Ms. Paul on that during that meeting, and I thought I prevailed. But if you could just look back on that, Mike, I appreciate it.
Sure.
And then also, do you know if those standards would be to highway district standards or to city standards?
As far as the widening,
The widening and the pedestrian, the sidewalks.
the sidewalk is just gonna be, I mean, it'd be similar to probably what we had on D Street, going to the school, where there would just be, there wouldn't be any curbing, it would just be a surfacing that didn't include curbing, it would just be an extension of the roadway that'll allow pedestrian access, is what we've discussed so far, just because there's no stormwater facilities in that area. So it'd be an issue if you installed curbing and tried to convey that to areas, you end up with stormwater runoff on adjacent properties, and so that would really be our concern there. But yeah, it would just be essentially roadway paving an additional 4 feet. I believe it's already 24 feet in width in that section, so it would just be the additional 4 feet. And then it was really open-ended as far as the pedestrian route from Sloniker to the school facility. So we really haven't worked through the details as far as what that looks like, but we're envisioning something like D Street with
Okay.
just adjacent road,
Part
asphalt.
of my concern with it is when you look at the widening of 28 feet, when you look at the south side of Mountain View as you're heading east, there's some steep grades that have to be contended to. And so there would probably have to be some additional easements or right-of-ways needed to construct to that. And I hope it doesn't complicate the project, and Scott, maybe you've looked at that already, but.
Our engineering department's looked at that, and it's really the north side is the only area that you'd be able to add the additional 4 feet on, just because of how it drops off on the south side. So, yeah, it's already been really predetermined that it'd be the north side that we'd have to add the additional 4 feet to.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy and Mike. Another question, or maybe it's not a question, but it's a thought I had on the pedestrian bridge that it would be constructed from F Street and then to the east side of Paradise Creek and then down to the proposed site. That also is on someone else's property, I thought, but maybe that's been worked out.
It's on, it would be our property, so it's part of Mountain View Park property.
Okay,
So it's up from F Street, you follow Paradise Path, and then essentially where it makes the turn. So you can see the flagpole portion of Mountain View Park. You just had it right there.
Oops. Yeah, that's not very good. We'll go to
Let's go back to the
That would be on
aerial.
city
the aerial. You
property,
want that
though.
one? Okay.
Let's go back to the
Amy,
aerial.
didn't you say that that's already been completed?
No, the access bridge at Mountain View, where the roundabout would
Oh.
roughly be, that
Oh.
portion is complete.
No.
Oops.
Anyway, the thought
That's
that I
it.
had
There you go.
that it was projected as a pedestrian bridge. And I was just thinking that with the new federal infrastructure bill, that there may be money to do an actual multimodal bridge instead of just a pedestrian bridge. I noticed, like the Third Street Bridge, it was funded to a certain point, it became too expensive, and they decided not to do it and only put the pedestrian bridge there. But if there were monies available for multimodal bridges with the new infrastructure plan, boy, I would sure push for doing it now and doing it right the first time and getting it done.
Sure.
So, just a thought.
Yeah, the original location is gonna be right there,
Yeah.
where Amy just had her pointer, a little bit further, pretty much right at that point right there, where the pathway takes a turn. So it'd be just on Mountain View Park property, and then it would go off onto the Logos property to connect to the roadway, the public roadway that was intended to be constructed there, the north-south one.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Amy and Mike.
Amy, I have one question, just for clarification. Is the proposal, for the amendment, based on the fact that they need more time and they don't have the funding to complete the original phasing, or that they now would like to have the opportunity to add the Friendship Hall? Or is it because this gives them an opportunity to add that component to it? I'm just trying to, I don't know if it's even relevant. I'm trying to get really a best understanding as to why the amendment is even being requested.
Yeah, so per the application that we received, it's due to lack of funding to complete the school at this particular time. And I do know there's a representative on behalf of the applicant that could probably speak in more detail to that. But the application stated that it was due to lack of funding for the school completion.
And this allows them to add a new feature, which is the Friendship Hall.
Correct.
I have a question that has to do with the original phasing and the conditional, the conditions that were actually proposed by the city originally. And it's my understanding that those conditions were part of Phase 1 because that infrastructure had to be in place prior to Phases 2 and 3. As a construction manager, it makes great sense to combine Phases 1 and 2 together. My concern or question is, can a temporary certificate of occupancy be issued to any structure of Phase 2 that's completed prior to Phase 1?
I think that would be a determination made by the building department at that time to determine whether it was safe, whether there was access to the site that was safe, whether enough infrastructure was complete to allow activity there. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Mike.
Yeah, a lot of it would come down to adequate access. I mean, typically you would be required to post a security for all the improvements if we were to allow Phase 2 to continue concurrently with Phase 1. And so that would happen. They'd post a security. We'd issue building permits to start construction in Phase 2, and then they would do both phases concurrently. But we wouldn't be able to issue temporary certificate of occupancy for any of those structures unless there was adequate, safety measures as far as access to the site. This would probably be the biggest issue.
Okay.
Usually temporary certificate of occupancy, it needs to be, the majority of it needs to be completed prior to receiving that.
Right.
It's just those minor details like landscaping, things like that, that may not be completed because of inclement weather.
Right. The
That
difference
we
between
allow temporary certificate of occupancy.
temp C of Os versus a regular C of O.
So they would need to complete the majority of the public improvements for that to occur.
Okay. The reason I bring it up is fundraising is always an issue, and I don't want everybody to get upside down in like the ice rink, where the intent is there, but the funding is just not following along with the intent, and now all of a sudden it's, we'll approve it without it, we'll approve it without it, and it kind of goes on until the funding finally comes to fruition. I just didn't know what the city's take was on that, since those conditions of Phase 1 were city-driven.
Yeah, our major concern is that all the city-required utilities and roadways are completed. And so if we have a security that ensures that they will be completed, if something falls through as far as the construction funding for Friendship Hall, then we have that security and we can complete those improvements. So we don't have a whole lot of concern with future fundraising for future phases as long as the improvements are completed.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have another question that might be an extension of what Marcia was asking about as far as the road that is being proposed on the west side of the subject property. It's going to go, according to the plat, it's going to go down to close to F Street. Does it go any further south in the future?
In our thoroughfare plan, it certainly does. Typically, the way that occurs is that when somebody develops their property or subdivides the property, then they need to account for that future roadway through the property as part of that development. And so the city doesn't have any plans to extend that roadway through another person's private property to the south, but as soon as that property owner decides to further develop their property, we'll have to have the conversation, and they'll have to include that in their plans depending upon what they're planning on doing with that property. So it would just go to the southern property line of the Logos property, and then, you know, eventually in the future, when that's developed, end up picking up from there and continuing on to the south, but won't occur until the adjacent property owner decides to develop their property,
Okay,
unless we go through eminent domain in order to, you know, push that roadway through, which, it's not a high priority to do that at this time, so.
okay, thank you.
Good.
Any other questions? Thank you. So at this time, we'll open up the public hearing. If the applicant would come up and talk about this.
Good evening, Scott Becker with Hodge and Associates, 405 South Washington.
Thank
And thank you, Amy, she did a great job, makes my job a lot easier. But you guys had some fantastic questions, and it might have been just a little bit confusing on how that's interpreted. As far as the funding, we have the funding in place to build the infrastructure. And so we're going full bore on that. The holdup was in our office with the roundabout. We're really close, and then I lost an employee that was working on that, and so we're picking up the pieces and putting that together. But we're working through the fastest path through the roundabout. It's all pretty much designed. It's just kind of that final tune-up before we can get that approved. As soon as that's approved, and as soon as spring breaks, we can finish that infrastructure plan. We've got utilities in process. We've got the detention ponds built, the grading, the site is graded, the field's in, the bridge is in, so we're really not that far behind, and it just makes sense that if the church wanted to kick off in the spring, the same time, our construction window is finite, so it just makes sense that they would be working on their construction at the same time that we're finishing up the infrastructure of the roadway. There's room to make, to get by with all of us in there at the same time, so really that's, the fundraising was coming in for that, but it's not the attractive part of the project. Nobody likes to see the water and sewer, but that's where a lot of the money goes, so as soon as that's in, I think it's gonna generate even more excitement to kick off the school, and then the school will follow in suit. There is some designs being worked on right now for the school, so we're really just it just kind of made sense to rearrange the phasing, and that's why we're here tonight. It's really not a complicated situation. It's just money came in for the church before it came in for the school building itself. So that's where we are, and I would certainly answer any questions that you guys might have. You've already had a bunch of good ones.
Scott, when you say church, do you mean the fellowship
The
hall?
fellowship hall, it would be used as a chapel and a fellowship hall. When the school is constructed, they would also be able to use that chapel too.
Okay, I guess I thought the chapel and the friendship hall were two different things.
Well, they would be used as a gathering
Okay.
place.
Any other questions for Scott?
I think so.
Great, thank you very much.
Took the full blame and we have no questions. How about that?
See if I think of some good ones.
Just make them up, Marshall.
Would anybody care to speak in favor of this application at this time? We don't have a very full house here, but give everybody the opportunity to speak. Is there anybody that would like to speak against or impartial? Does anybody want to speak at all?
About anything.
Please, come up, state your name and address in the mic.
I'm George Canny. I'm a resident. I live at 821 Ford Street, so across the street from neighbors which border the path that go to Mountain View Park and so on. And so we get an opportunity to walk that path on a regular basis. And I just wanted to ask, with the roadbed on the east side of the creek going down, as I walk, I think about where the pedestrian bridge is being proposed. There's, you know, a lot of work that's been put in there for water and sewer, I think. So as I look across the creek, I notice that there is a fire hydrant standing on a standpipe. Right now, currently, the pipe is about 5 feet above the ground, and then the hydrant is on top of it. My concern, obviously, is will the road perhaps act as a levee? Again, this has been an issue that was brought up before, I think, with regard to water flowing through, perhaps if we were to get a melt off the mountain or something. So has that all been kind of addressed?
Since Scott's not on a mic, Mike or Amy, do you know the answer to that? If not, yeah, we'll have you come back up. Did you have any other questions, George?
No, really, I think that was it. The other was that I wasn't so sure, it's new to me that F Street is being proposed eventually as another arterial to enter into the property, provided that the private owner offers, you know, the land to make that possible. That makes sense to me because of my concern with the traffic patterns around Mountain View and F Street, which I know we've all seen addressed with a four-way stop and so on. But in the summertime, when the games are going on at the field over there at Mountain View Park and stuff, I think just the concern would be with Good Sam and the other schools and the Herc and all the rest of that, that could become just a zoo without some other method of accessing the property that Logos and Christ Church are at.
Okay,
And thank you.
you bet. Scott, if you'd care to come up again and clarify that question for the record.
Yes, absolutely. The fire hydrant was put in there for water testing, you know, once they test the water and you know, they pressure test it and then decontaminate it. Well, they have to get enough flow out of the pipe to flush the pipe. And so they need a fire hydrant. And that one is just a temporary fire hydrant. So it does sit a little bit higher and does look a little bit ominous. But the other thing is, there's two large, we normally have detention ponds in this area, but these are more like retention ponds. They will hold the water, and if the flood waters come in higher, they'll actually flow into those ponds and fill those up. The roadway is about at grade now, and there is a cross path that connects to some additional detention ponds on the other side. So it won't act as a levee, it does act as a, you know, it does go back and forth. So those are great concerns, you know, that anytime you live in a floodplain concerns are huge. So I don't.
So in short then, that temporary standpipe is not an indication of any elevational change of the road? Okay.
Correct. Yep. But that's a great question. Thank you.
If anybody else care to come up and comment at all? All right, that said, we'll close the public hearing, open up to the board for discussions.
Well, I've got no problem with the phasing whatsoever. I think it makes sense, and it really doesn't change anything in my mind. Parking will be similar or the same, and if we can accommodate, you know, the phasing, I still have a little bit of concern with some of the conditions on the original conditional use permit, but Mike helped me alleviate, and Amy helped me alleviate those conditions. So I've got no problem with the amendment.
But I would like to follow up on Marshall's first concern, or maybe have a better understanding of, if there is a different jurisdiction, should we not have that jurisdiction as a condition that they approve the design of the road? Or should we, because I don't feel comfortable about assuming that they will.
That's pretty much inherent that we have to work with North Latah County Highway District in order to permit that to go through, so.
Okay. So that would be through the permitting process, I guess. Okay.
And I think that would actually kind of go hand in hand with the fact that the plans are required to meet current codes and ordinances. And so at this point, since the plans were never permitted, now they're subject to current parking prior to the previous parking. So the right-of-way, street widths, all that kind of stuff's gonna have to come into play in terms of what's required at the time they're submitted. I'm in favor of it, obviously, because in this, you can't do asphalt right now. Cost of materials is getting higher and higher, and procurement time getting longer and longer, so it gives the applicant the opportunity to at least start purchasing materials, or at least ordering the longer lead time items, so that when spring rolls around and they wrap up phase one, they've already got a jump start on materials and procurement for phase two. So that just, in our current construction market, that just makes tons of sense to do.
And I think it makes sense to modify the phasing to accommodate the funding that they've raised, because there's no sense in delaying the start of the project.
Right.
Trying to raise more funds just to stick with the phasing that's been laid out here in the past. So it really simply makes sense for them to move forward with the project, with the funding that they currently have.
Yes, the modifications that they've made to their phasing makes absolute business sense. And it's very agile and wise of them to ask for this, yes.
Agreed. Marshall?
Joe, I'd make a motion.
All right, I'm willing to receive one.
Okay. I'd move approval of the amendment to the existing conditional use permit with the same conditions as applied before. And Amy, do we need to include the addition of Moscow City Code 4-8-4 H and J in those conditions, or is it automatic?
It really is automatic. I think it's important that you recognize that the board has made the decision to allow one extension, rather than changing that time frame.
Okay, so we could just add it as a condition?
Correct.
Okay, so I'd move approval of the amendment to the existing conditional use permit with the same conditions applying, with the addition of Moscow City Code -4-8-4 H and J. And I assume that the same relevant criteria and standards would apply. Do we need to also approve those?
We will, yeah, we'll have a separate meeting to approve those, and that will just include the new phasing.
Okay, and then in that motion, I'd ask staff to prepare those documents for us to look at.
So we have a motion.
Yeah, I second it.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We unanimously pass that, 5-0. And directing staff to create the relevant criteria and findings of fact was part of that motion, so we're done. On to any other reports or announcements or upcoming?
Nothing from staff at this time, just the RCS meeting scheduling. I'm not sure if everybody was
Okay.
able to coordinate with Jennifer.
I had a thought on that because I can't get here by 5:30. However,
You're looking at Thanksgiving Day? Is that?
no. Actually Wednesday, I could leave work a little early, start my vacation earlier and get here by then. But what I was thinking is I don't normally leave before 6 ever anyway. So I could zoom in on any one of those nights at 5:30 if we don't have a quorum.
I think we're moving to the following, just because it's now, the date is getting closer, and then we were talking about prepping the RCS and stuff. And so I've gotten responses from everybody except Annette and Marshall.
I'm available.
You are?
I apologize, I
when is
haven't
that,
responded.
It would be the Monday and Tuesday following Thanksgiving.
Okay, yeah, I should be available.
Okay, so if you guys are both available, Tim, did you want to try to make it to the Monday?
And the 30th is a possibility.
Monday's the
It's just
29th.
there's a family issue going on that I haven't resolved yet.
Okay, well, and we've got 4 without you,
Okay.
and so at that point, either day would work better, so
Oh, I see what's
I
going on.
didn't-
This is a 5 or 5:30?
It's 5:30.
5:30.
Oh, I think I can make the 29th. It's after a physical, and if that should go routine. So I think I can make that.
So should we just do the Monday the
Okay.
wanted to go, we would have more.
Okay. I have since I wasn't at the last meeting, I have a kind of a combination of a question and a thanks, because I understand the city council overturned the cell tower thing, so that's moving forward, assuming someone else on the opposite side doesn't oppose it. And so the thanks aspect of it was, we went through that 3 times, all wanting to pass it, but we're being hindered by the second item, wanting the city to overturn us. My question is, are cell towers now considered a neighborhood thing now that cell phones? I guess the question really is, what was the grounds for overturning that, so that I'm assuming it kind of becomes, well, not a precedent, but,
Yeah, kind of precedent.
I mean, to me, during that whole thing, it seemed like a cell tower was like a water tower, like high voltage towers, like a pump station. It's just, it is what it needs to be. And I didn't know, if not going to that city council meeting, I didn't know what their rationale was.
Yeah, I mean, nothing about the criteria has changed as far as city code goes. I think it was just a matter of perspective.
Okay.
And, you know, making a decision to decide which one they felt fit best. But I'd be happy to share the minutes with you too, or the video link, and kind of timestamp where that conversation is, so that you can kind of hone in on those details. I can send that to you tomorrow.
Okay.
I mean, they could have passed it at their meeting. They did not need to remand it back to us.
The first time?
Sure.
Correct.
I don't know why they just didn't take the bull by the horns and do it.
Yeah, I won't recuse them for that, but I am thankful that it went through. And obviously, things that make sense still require conditional use permits, so I'm not making the assumption that cell towers now don't need a conditional use permit, but it made sense that in today's day and age, everyone here's got a cell phone that they probably turned off during the meeting. So I mean, it is.
Well, it certainly
What it
is an
is.
input, is to get a feel for how the city council looked at the thing. I mean, we obviously should kind of take that on board, and that's their interpretation, that's how they're feeling about
My
it.
biggest problem with it was, I felt there were other locations that were applicable that they didn't even look at.
So anyway, my contrary to what someone would normally think, I thank them for overturning what we just couldn't get past, trying to follow the guidelines that we're constrained with, so.
Yeah.
Are there any other meetings forthcoming here
Just
during the holidays?
Yeah, on the 29th, the RCS meeting, but there is nothing, we have no other applications at this time.
All right, well, I then make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that is unanimous. Where
Hey,
to-
Joe,
Yeah.
now that